I was going to say that all my childhood, my family were campers. We were always going on family vacations, and every summer we'd go to Yellowstone and see the Tetons and stuff. And so I got an appreciation for the scenic wonders, I think. And I was always trying to. And I've been a camper ever since, too. I'm on my fifth one.
Yeah, right? All this stuff to get ready for a podcast. Oh, we're filming it, too, so that face you just made is being seen across the country and world.
Oh, fun.
Just going to warn you, Gregory Hull. I've got Gregory Hull here today. He's dropped in. He brought me a bunch of new paintings, which I love, and including some abstract stuff, which is definitely new. Have you done that before, by the way? Just out of curiosity.
Just back in high school.
Yeah. And did you enjoy doing it? Do you enjoy doing it?
Yeah, it was interesting. But I think all realistic painting begins with abstract, too.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So,
yeah,
it's related.
So, Greg is known for his plein air paintings and his desert and West Coast paintings. But where did you grow up, Greg?
I grew up in Bountiful, Utah.
Ah, that's a Mormon country, right?
Yeah, it was religiously conservative, and I was not part of the predominant religion. And so I think it made me sort of look inward, and I was interested in music and art. So
you weren't Mormon in that area?
No.
Your folks weren't, but probably in Bountiful, I would assume 80% Mormon, maybe?
I think it was 95.
Wow. And what was your dad and mom doing there?
He got transferred there from Oklahoma to work in the refinery petroleum business.
And so were you born in Utah?
I was born in Oklahoma, and they moved when I was 1 to Utah.
So you consider yourself a Utah person, I would say?
Well, kind of. I guess I have an accent.
I don't know. It's more Oklahoma if you really want to know the truth. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, I think so.
I never spoke in Oklahoma.
Yeah, but your dad did. Where was your dad from?
He grew up in Wyoming, Laramie.
Oh, he did. Interesting. And your mom, where was she from?
Eastern Washington.
Okay, so West Coast folk for sure. And so you went there as 1, and then when at that point did you start? Did you first really embrace art? Were you just a young 3rd, 4th grade kind of thing?
Yeah, I liked drawing and everything, and working our workbooks and Utah history and stuff like that. We had to do all the covered wagons and drawn by oxen and stuff like that, and I was kind of good at it. I could draw mountains. They were very simple mountains, but and then in high school we had a very bizarre teacher. He wanted to expose us to a lot of different things, and acrylics were coming out at that time. It was the 60s.
What year would this have been?
65, 66, around there.
And but just going back a little bit, when you were in your grade school, did you win any awards or recognition for your art?
Well, I think the teacher would call out like, "Oh, look at this, the way he did it," and they were impressed. And
so you were getting, at an very early age, you were getting singled out as somebody who was good at making art.
Yeah, kind of a feedback.
And that resonated with you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And do you have brothers and sisters?
3 sisters.
Oh, wow. That's hard to do. And they're older or younger?
One older. She beat me up a lot.
Yeah.
But, and 2 younger.
And were they involved in art at all?
My younger sister, Deborah, became an artist too.
And she is an artist?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's cool. What does she do?
All kinds of different things. She's doing abstracts and landscapes too. She lives in Moab, so she's inspired by that local scenery.
Flavor. Is her last name?
McDermott.
And so tell me her name again.
Deborah
I'll have
McDermott.
to go check it out. If one holds good, 2 must be great. And so you were recognized early on. And what did your folks, did they encourage that kind of interest?
Not really. I mean, I started piano lessons and I was really interested in music. I could play the piano fairly well. I was, headed toward being a classical sort of musician.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got, sidetracked in the art. And the art, your mistakes became interesting and artistic.
Mm-hmm.
So the music sort of went by the wayside because music has to be precise, when you perform it, and
Right.
you have to play all the right notes and do it perfectly. And in art, you could be free.
And so when were you doing, when did you kind of stop doing the music part?
That was in high school too,
What time frame would that have been?
around 67.
So you're a junior or so?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And but you're like a very big guy. I mean, you're impressively large. Were they trying to recruit you for football, basketball, and all that stuff?
Yeah, but I was uncoordinated, so I had to stick with the painting.
Yeah.
But I did become a school artist in my high school senior year.
And what does that mean?
We worked on scenery for the plays and did a lot of stuff like that. And so we had a lot of free time that we got, excused from class, and
Uh-huh.
that was fun.
And you graduate 68?
Mm-hmm.
So 68's a very interesting time frame in the world of Vietnam. So what happened with all that? Were you...
Well, I went off to college, and as long as I was in college, I was okay. But then Nixon started the draft and the lottery system.
Yeah, that was 69.
My number was called
Yeah, what was it?
161.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty low number.
So I went and did but at the time I had quit college and moved back home and started a railroad job. And I had bad knees. I've had bad knees my whole life, sort of arthritis, or I don't know if it's a congenital defect or whatever it is, but they convinced the draft board that my knees were bad.
You're a 4F, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So you started college. You were in high school. You were the high school artist, and then you went to what college?
Well, I went to Utah State University in Logan, and they sort of emphasized the commercial art, which I wasn't really interested in, illustration and stuff like that.
Right. So after what, a year? You did it a year?
After a year, yeah. I wasn't happy, so moved down to my parents again, and they helped me for a year or so, and then I got into the University of Utah.
And you worked on the railroad for a year?
Yeah, 4 years.
Oh, you worked there for 4 years on the railroad before you went back to school.
Well, while I was going.
Oh, yeah.
I
What did
worked
you
there.
do?
I was a machinist helper.
Uh-huh. And what does a machinist helper do?
You hand the tools to the machinist.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And that's it?
And you do the dirty work that he wants you to, and it was a dirty business.
Did you...
Overalls and grease and a lot
Did you
of dirt.
like it at all, or was
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
It's interesting to learn all about the diesel locomotives.
And do you have this like love of railroads at all? I've never seen you paint one.
Well, no, because the funny thing is, when I was 9, I was in a train accident on the way to school.
All right. What was that?
The neighbor lady took us to school, and she had this old jalopy, and it was raining, and there were, I think, 6 kids and her. We were all piled into her car, and she stalled over the first rail, and the passenger train was coming 72 miles an hour.
Oh my God.
Right for us. And she thought, she was cranking it.
Oh, Jesus.
And
Right.
it wouldn't turn over and everything. And just about when it was going to hit us, she screamed, "Jump out!" And I sort of just went for the door in slow motion, and it hit us. It tore off the front of the car. But, miraculously, we all walked away
Oh my God.
with
No kids were
no
killed?
injuries, just cuts and stuff.
Oh my gosh. Do you still have memories of that?
Yeah, and then I found it ironic that I go to work for the railroad later on in life.
Do you think there was a correlation that you did that?
And then I lived in Flagstaff, which is a railroad town with 70 trains a day going through. Oh, well, it was a gift, I guess.
Yeah, and all those kids in that car. Do you keep up with any of those kids? That's kind of a bonding experience. Were any of your sisters in there?
Yeah,
They were too.
my older sister was in there.
Yeah, did it affect her as well?
We still joke about it and stuff and read the newspaper clipping.
Yeah, that's amazing. Holy crap. Yeah.
Speeding train hits car, 7 walk away.
That's amazing they walked away. Yeah, that's so, but that sits with you, I'm sure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Must. I won't ask you for any railroad paintings.
Well, it was. I experienced the time when they switched over to Amtrak. So, the Union Pacific passenger trains were sort of going out when I was working there, and that was a bit nostalgic. Because to work on those, you had to go inside the. It was like a room, and it was blasted hot and everything. And, but they were all enclosed, and then later on, the locomotives had the engines on the outside.
So you do that for 4 years while you go to school, and you go to Utah State?
University of Utah, and I
of Utah.
found that Alvin Gittens, who was, he was actually who I was looking for, someone that could teach you something.
And what kind of art did he do?
Well, he was a renowned portrait artist in Utah, and he had studied in England, and he was LDS, so he eventually got to Utah, but he was classically trained, so he was, trained in the academic figure studies and portraits and everything like that. So that's what I did.
Yep. And yeah, because your first paintings were figurative, right? A lot of your stuff was figurative. I'm very good. And that was related to how you saw yourself through his eyes in some ways?
Yeah, I was just really, I was captivated by the face and the figure and everything, and learning all about it. So I really like doing faces.
Mm-hmm. You still do some of that?
Yeah.
Occasionally? Is that for sale, or is that more for you?
Oh, it's kind of for me, because while I was doing all this figure work, I threw in a still life, and that led to me, after graduating with my master's in 77, I went to Los Angeles, and that's where I met the Stern brothers, and I went up Rodeo Drive with my portfolio, and
You were talking about George Stern and...
yeah, I walked into the Peterson galleries, and that's the first time I experienced the California Impressionists. And I was sort of blown away by them. I didn't know anything about them, and it was a whole gallery full of them. And so John Stern was running that gallery. And he said, "We can't take you, but my brother across the street is in Wally Finley galleries, and they might be able to do something." So I took my portfolio across the street, and they got me in to Wally Finley based on this still life that I had in my portfolio. They said, "Oh, we don't like your figures. They're naked and blah, 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 but we could probably sell this."
Mm-hmm. And did they? And that was figurative and still life stuff, or just still life? Just still life, yeah, because you do beautiful still lives. And that was Finley Gallery. And so you graduate from University of Utah. You do your master's there. And when you get out in 77, your one goal is to be an artist, to paint and to sell art, not to teach at all, right?
Well, I had thought of that. I applied at a couple of different schools and for a teaching position, but then the more I thought about it, the more I didn't really want to move that far away or go back east or be in academia.
And were you selling when you were in college and doing your
Yeah,
masters?
like it was a dribble, a steady dribble of things, you know.
So you had an idea you could probably make a living, or you thought you might be able to.
I was stubborn. I wanted to.
Well, I think though, it does take that to some extent, don't you think?
Yeah.
To say I'm going to do this or I'm going to fail and I'm going to just do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get into Finley's Galley in L.A. and you're 24 maybe, something like that, 25. And then what happens from that point? Because you're exposed to this plein air stuff, right?
Yeah, and I was always interested in doing that, but it was sort of a sideline because that same high school teacher had taken us outdoors too, and exposed us to, hey, paint it from on location and do, observation directly. But that fit in with also setting up a still life. You're working with inside the studio, but you're still working with light and shadow and everything, same things. And so, yeah, they just concentrated on the still life aspect. And so I explored it too. And I did thousands of them, I think.
Of the
Still lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was with them for 15 years.
Wow, that's a long time. And were you showing with any other galleries at that time or just them?
Just them. They made me sign an exclusive with them, a contract and everything. And they supported me all those years. So
what do you think about that, doing an exclusive? Was it for your would you recommend other artists do that?
I don't know, because it sort of cubby holes you and, puts you into a place where you might not want to be freedom wise, but it did help me a lot. I was able to buy a house and all that stuff because I had a steady income. Mm-hmm. And then I had a couple of shows a year, in Chicago and New York, Palm Beach. Mm-hmm. So,
and your job was would they buy everything that you made or they would just sell it and?
They would consign it, but they would frame it. They had a special frame company that worked with them. And so I just had to deliver the paintings,
Right. And would you have to sign that every year? Exclusive contract?
I can't remember.
How does that work? Because at some point, 15 years comes by and you go, I don't want to do this anymore. Or did they say we're done? What happened at that point?
It was a real thick contract.
Yeah.
Pages and, initial this. And it was like a world contract too. But I think I might have, renewed it or something. But eventually, these were older people and they started dying off. And then Wally Finley himself died and the gallery was sold to other owners. And that was at the time that I was starting to get interested in landscape painting outside, plein air.
Mm-hmm. So once he died off, it's just kind of, okay, your contract's up kind of thing.
Yeah, and they wanted me to, do the old stuff that I had done before. And
the new gallery owners?
Yeah.
And you just didn't want to do that? Yeah.
I'll stay with you if you move on with me, but they didn't want to move on.
Yeah, and you're getting close to 40 at this point? Something like that?
Yeah, that was like early 90s, and that's when I met Ray Redfern. And I got in with this, the Plein Air Painters of America, the Papa group on Catalina Island. So I started doing those shows, and I got into his gallery.
And that was early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Right, because that was really kind of popping at that time, right? Plein air was really in vogue.
Yeah, well, Denise Burns out on Catalina, she sort of dredged up the plein air name and started promoting it, and she really did a good job of making the public aware of that movement. So it's still going strong today.
Yeah, and that's still really what you do now, right? Still, to some extent?
No, I don't want to do those wet painting shows, but don't
No,
get me
no,
started.
I don't mean that. But your paintings, let's say like the big swirl piece you brought in today, was that done plein air and then finished in the studio?
No.
How was that done?
Uh, well, I go out and do sketches, and
Yeah,
then
plein air sketches. Though.
yeah, and take a lot of pictures. And I think a lot of the work needs to be done in the
Yeah,
studio. You know.
but you work from a plein air study. You go out during that time, catch the light, catch the
Hmm.
sensibilities of the moment, do a quick hour, 2 hour study out in the field. And
Yeah, but most of mine, they need help in the studio, and they need to be looked at over time because, and that's what I found with these plein air shows, that I couldn't just whip one out and throw it in a frame. You know,
right.
some artists became good at that, but and I did it for a while. Those Catalina shows were, you know, what you did the past week. You put it in a frame,
Hmm.
and they sold well, but there was something, you know, I like to varnish them. I like to look at them, make sure they take them inside
Yeah,
because.
you want to finish it up.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of plein air painters do that. Really, quite frankly, I think all the good ones do, quite frankly. And then you work from those to the bigger pieces.
Yeah.
And how have you seen that change? Because it was really quite, I would just say, on fire in the 90s, all the 90s, early 2000s. But it seems like it's lost a little bit of its glow. You think that's a true statement?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think the public is so aware of it now that maybe it's become a little more blasé, or,
Uh huh.
you know, unfortunately. And then there's so many good young artists that have come up. You know, they can undercut you, and
Price wise, you mean?
yeah. So it's there's just much more awareness of it, and there are a lot of these plein air shows and
Yeah.
festivals and everything.
So
It's
where are you living in the 90s? Are you in Sedona or Flagstaff?
yeah, Sedona,
You're in Sedona. And when did you move to Sedona?
95.
You moved in 95. And you moved from Flagstaff?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. And what brought you to Sedona?
Oh, I just needed a change, and I thought that it was a more artistic environment to live in, and you know,
Very beautiful, for sure.
I think I just wanted a change at that point. I had lived in Flagstaff 14 years
Yeah,
and
it's a long time.
shoveled snow and stuff,
Hmm.
and I wasn't convinced that uh, subject-wise Flagstaff is was you know my place. So I don't know. And Sedona didn't end up being it either, but I did like the Grand Canyon a lot. And
Yeah,
went
I
up
mean, you're
there.
kind of known. I mean, I don't. I consider you to be one of the Grand Canyon painters. I don't know if you consider yourself to be one of those, do you?
Well, it's certainly one important aspect.
Yeah, you did that major commission for the Carolyn Commons on the Grand Canyon. What is it about that subject that really, floats your boat, so to speak?
It's those beautiful colors, you know, the atmosphere and everything, trying to capture it,
Hmm.
and it's always a challenge. And it's and drawing too. It's just a drawing exercise. You
Hmm.
know, it's so amazing. I've done 3 river trips down the Colorado through the Grand
Hmm.
Canyon. They were all painting trips. So,
So you're doing little plein air paintings,
hmm,
and this is like a 10-day or 2 week trip.
yeah.
And yeah, because I think, I mean, I have a couple of your Grand Canyons pieces in my own collection. You do things a little differently, which I like. You'll do these very intimate close up imagery of the rocks. Do you do that purposely when you're looking at that, or how do you decide? I mean, the Grand Canyon is so immense, but if you choose just a small, intimate little section, it seems different. I like it. Maybe that's why I like it so much. Dead air.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm looking for a composition, probably in
Uh huh.
some sort of color scheme that's interesting me
Uh huh.
at that moment. I don't know. It's hard to get a sky into a Grand Canyon painting if you're down there on the river,
Yes.
because it's usually a little slice or
Uh
something,
huh.
and then from up above, it's completely different
Which
colors.
which do you prefer to paint, above or below?
Well, I think the South Rim views are the classic views that everyone knows
Mm-hmm.
and familiar with, and those are sort of iconic. And then I don't know if people appreciate the river views if they haven't been down there themselves, or at least been to the river on
Mm-hmm.
a hike and back.
Right.
But anybody that goes down the river would, identify with them, I'm sure.
Now, what about you, though?
Well, those trips are life changing because it's all about experiencing it, and painting and reacting artistically is just one facet. There are other, it's an amazing experience. So
Yeah,
that's what you're trying to put into paintings.
you become the small, insignificant speck in the grandeur of Mother Nature, which can be very dominating if you're not careful too.
Yeah.
And so, do you still make trips down to the Grand Canyon, river trips, or do you have any plan?
Well, the last one was 2014. I think I'm getting too old to do it because, I was going to say that all my childhood, my family were campers. We were always going on family vacations, and I every summer we'd go to Yellowstone and
Mm-hmm.
see the Tetons and stuff, and so I got an appreciation for the scenic wonders, I think,
Mm.
and I was always trying to. And I've been a camper ever since too. I'm on my fifth one,
Uh-huh.
and I like the idea of getting to a place that's pretty remote and then setting up, and you're able to paint there. And
You think that's what drew you to plein air painting, because you did like to camp so much and go to these remote places?
I think so,
Yeah, it makes sense.
because I've taken 2 pack trips into the Wind River Mountains up in Wyoming,
Mm-hmm.
and then a couple into the High Sierras in California. So yeah, it's part of the whole thing, experiencing it, up close and all day long. And it's not about suffering necessarily, but you do have to suffer.
A little bit, yeah, there's no doubt. Especially on the sleeping aspect part of it.
Yeah.
But do you still plan to do more of that, to camp?
Yeah.
You're not
I
done.
still have the camper, and I still like to go
Uh-huh.
and do a painting trip.
Well, and then you can write it off.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working, which you are, of course. Everybody that I know that's a painter, that's plein air, I mean, their greatest joy, I think, is to be outdoors in nature.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be kind of almost universal.
That's the happy place.
Yeah.
And you try to put that into your painting. So hopefully, the people can see, someone can identify with that, the feeling, because that's what landscape painting is to me. It's emotional.
And that's how you know if you've succeeded, if you feel like you've captured that emotional energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thinking about your paintings, I do see that more than maybe other landscape painters. There is an ethereal kind of sensibility, especially with light.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're very much attuned to light, and of course the color follows that. And I hadn't really thought about it until just thinking when you talk about it in those terms. What is your favorite subject? Because you've been doing a lot of desert and saguaros, and extremely successful, in my opinion, on what you're producing. And because you're living in Phoenix now too, I guess, right?
Yeah, I live in East Mesa, which is really close to the superstitions, and there's something about the desert colors, and that's really, it didn't interest me that much before, but living down there for 4 years now, it's really calling my name, and I like to get out, and the skies are always incredible, sunsets and moons, and cloud patterns and everything. It's really, I'm glad I'm living there.
Yeah, and was the reason you left Sedona, was it literally got too crowded?
Yeah, Sedona became, just overrun with tourists. But I also, it was a matter of relating to the subject matter too. I think, the forms were so bizarre and unique that I don't know. I sort of reduced it down to red and green. You're in a juniper pinyon forest, and then red rocks,
Right.
all the same color. And that's why it's interesting to have, other people come in there, other artists from a distance, and, see what they do. Because they're more, they see it in a fresh eye. I lived there for 20 years. Every day I lived in this beauty, and I was scrutinizing, looking at, and basically I decided that it's either sunrise or sunset, and then the rest of the day it's flat light on everything.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So it's and
But those sunrises and sunsets are
yeah, and you have to
pretty
be
remarkable.
so fast and furious, and so both of those times aren't my strong times. It's the middle of the day probably that's the best. But
Well, one of the things I look at in an artist who wants to paint the desert is if they can do a saguaro. I think that's a good critique. If you can do one, you have some chops, and maybe you can clearly. You're probably one of the top. What is it about the saguaro that you need to do as an artist to capture that? Because you've done it.
well, I don't know. They change colors. The green changes, and
Yeah, you can almost read it sometimes,
Mhm.
right? And it seems to me also the one thing I see people who don't get it right is they don't realize saguaros aren't symmetrical. They don't have symmetry. They're asymmetrical objects. And don't you think you have to kind of live in them or around them to capture that essence?
Yeah, it helps because they're so they're such an old plant.
Yeah.
By the time they have arms, they're 100 years old.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
it's amazing they've survived so successfully. And it's just when you think of the desert, you think, oh, dry, brown, everything. But no, it's green
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah, it's true.
It's amazing, the Sonoran Desert.
And do you go out and paint a lot in the Sonoran Desert too?
Yeah, I can get out there pretty quickly.
I'm surprised you haven't moved to Tucson. Honestly.
I know I keep looking at those mountains, but there's a bunch of houses in the way.
Yeah, well, you just go a little further east, you won't see them. And we do have the saguaros. We have oogles and oogles of them.
I know.
Yeah. Next stop, maybe Tucson.
I keep going south, huh?
You have so far, and it's that's the problem I think with Phoenix is that it is so metropolitan. It's hard to find that spot that's where you can still feel like you're in the desert, and you're in an area that has that.
Well, artists have this little inner world, and it's sort of you go outside and it can be chaos, but your world is inside and in your little studio and your happy workplace, and that's what I feel where I am now.
Yeah, you like your environment.
Mm-hmm.
You like your studio.
Yeah, and we're in a suburban subdivision, so jammed in there.
Yeah. How often do you paint? Do you paint 5 days a week?
Yeah, I try to. I mean, there's paint always on my palette. Sometimes it gets dry, but it depends on what I'm working on.
And will you paint how many hours a day?
I can't answer that. It's varies.
Yeah, I mean, is it
Sometimes it's a couple of strokes, and then you got to do something else.
Yeah.
It's not there, or not feeling it, or I don't know what to do. But a lot of it is just looking at your work and analyzing it. See what it needs, and What would make it better?
And do you work with more than one painting at a time? On more than one painting at a time?
Yeah, sometimes.
And do you know when you got one right? When you really nailed it, or are you?
Yeah,
too
I
close?
usually if something's really going well, I'll take it to the end, and it'll be done. I'll sign it and everything, and I'll know it's done.
Mm-hmm.
Other things are more problematic, and they need large sections reworked or something like that, or just more scrutiny. And some are easier than others.
And if you have a painting that's problematic, let's say you get close to finishing it, but you just can't quite finish it, will you scrape it, the whole painting, or you just a portion of it and start over? Or just set it aside and say, I'll work on this another year?
Well, I've scraped some, and I have stacks of like questionable things. They have
Right.
something good about them, but they're not really to the final stage yet. So maybe I'll get to them.
And is that final stage always sign your name and title?
Yeah.
But you don't title until you're done with the painting and signed it?
Well, I like to varnish it too, because then the colors come alive again. They tend to sink in and get dull and I've always believed in the final varnish. Some artists don't do it, but I think it brings back the way the colors were applied. The strength.
And that's going to help you with titling it as well, you think?
Could.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. As a writer, I find the title really helps solidify the book for me. And I almost always have the title before I even really kind of start. There's something there, and it's just, I go, oh, this is what this book's about. But it's not that way for painting, really, is it?
Well, it can be. Yeah. Sometimes you come up with a title right off, or like you're out in the field and it hits you, and that's what it's going to be. But
so you'll see a image you're painting, like a little plein air study, and you go, oh, this is such and such, Moonrise over Hernandez kind of thing, and then that title influences on how you're going to try to look at that imagery.
Maybe.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. And then you stick with that title to the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you forget it.
Well, that's a lucky break,
Yeah.
Because sometimes
Yeah.
what am I going to call this?
Well, I've had artists who call me and say, help me with the title. I get that on a fairly regular basis from a multitude of artists.
Well, when I was doing still lifes, it was always still life with oranges, still life with strawberries,
Yeah.
still life with apples, And that got really monotonous. So then I tried jazz titles. But sometimes it can help. I've had really terrible titles too.
Yeah, and that can be a problem. I will tell you, as a dealer,
Yeah.
if you have a painting and you have a really bad title or a descriptive that really has a negative connotation, that can be a negative to selling your art. I don't know if you've experienced that, but
Yeah.
so
And you don't want to state the obvious necessarily either,
right, brown house. Oh yeah, it is.
Yep.
Well, and I think for young artists out there who are considering this, think about the titles. The titles are not insignificant, in my opinion. And you think about Maynard Dixon and some of the things, they're iconic titles, right? Earth, Noah, Cloud, World, Shapes of Fear. These have a ring to them of poetry. He was a poet, but, I think it's important to have that. I remember really good titles from artists that do it. And the other ones just kind of, so. But you don't seem to have that issue dealing with titles so much.
Well, I've changed some
And why have you changed them?
because they were stupid.
They just hurt the sale of the painting, or you just really didn't like what it said, or both?
Both, sometimes you think, oh, this title will help it, and then it doesn't. So
Yeah. Dixon had a painting like that. He titled it "The Bank Wins," and it was this empty ranch house that had gone neglected, and Nevada, and he finally washed it over and put Lonesome Ranch or something like that. Abandoned Homestead is what I think the actual title was, and
but I like the bank wins.
But this was 1935 when he did it.
That's not going to sell it.
Yeah, and nobody likes bankers at that point, and the people with the money actually are bankers or those people finances, and they don't like that title, right? It's a very negative one, and they're already being kind of, I'm sure, denigrated in the Depression because the world kind of collapsed. So I think it became a real problem for him to try to sell it because of that, and so he got rid of that title and sold it in an abandoned homestead, which ended up in a banker's collection, by the way. So he was right. Dixon was correct. So it does make a difference. I think it really does make a difference on titles. So what's going on now in your world in 2019, almost 2020?
Well, I'm still interested, and I'm trying to carve out, time periods where I'll work on certain subject matters, and I have those, like I said, the stacks of ones that are half done, half baked, I'd call them, and but it's been good, and I'm grateful that I've been able to do this so long, because when you consider that I signed that first contract in '78, it's been 40.
Yeah, long time.
And I've been with you almost 20, I think.
Yeah, I think you have. Probably is 20. No, time goes quickly. And I've always loved your material. And I'm always amazed you'll bring something in that's just shockingly good. And it just like floors me. Maybe almost more than any other artist. You'll hit one that's just so, incredibly strong. And again, I think just us talking now, I get that sense that one of the reasons I like those pieces when they do hit me is it's that emotional connection with the image, which is, I love the desert, I love the Southwest, and there's something in your paintings that on occasion will really strongly grab me. And it just like when I see it instantaneously, I'll feel a connection. So the fact that we've talked about how emotion plays into what you're trying to get, that makes sense. You've won. You got it. The Gregory Hull wins.
Well, you're a good dealer too. You're one of the few honest ones, and you're sensitive to everyone's work, and you really I can tell you're enthusiastic about work.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get to look at your paintings all the time. So I've got still lifes, I got Grand Canyons, I've got those, those things. I think it's important as a dealer, if you're going to handle artists, you should have those artists in your home and live with them and experience those paintings. Because if you can't do that, why are you selling it to your clients? You should be the first person that wants to take it home and put it in your house. And living around paintings for 20 years really gives you a sense of that person's soul, so to speak, because we get to see how you paint as well. I mean, every artist has a very distinctive style. You have a very distinctive style. You don't look like anybody else's style. And if you're around it a lot, especially if you live with the art, then you really know that it's a fingerprint.
It starts to, look like another one of mine or something.
Yeah, right. I mean, I can tell.
Which is good. I mean,
yeah, that's what you strive for, right?
Yeah.
You find that style. Even your still lifes and your earlier work too, I can still see the same. I can still see it there, even though it's a different kind of sensibility and a different subject matter. You develop that skill set, whatever it is, and kind of guess it sticks with you, like handwriting, I guess.
You're in it for the long haul.
Yeah. Any advice you would give to young artists out there who go, yeah, I'm thinking about doing this, or maybe even artists that are maybe not young but are thinking about trying to take it up?
Well, you have to be stubborn, and you have to be willing to, sacrifice everything. It's hard to live with an artist, so your family probably suffers, and,
In what way is it hard to live with an artist?
Well, it's just that the creative nerve, it's gonna bother somebody in somebody close that you care for, and but you need that freedom, and you demand it from everybody around you, so they kind of have to bite the bullet and suffer.
Yeah.
But I think I was very determined that I didn't want a regular old job, especially after the railroad thing. It was very interesting, and I liked those years. And I actually did drawings of the tools, in my spare time there. I was a tool room attendant once. And so I like mechanical stuff and the way things are made. And I don't know, but just, yeah, you have to be stubborn and just really stick with it and show up. It's self-discipline too. When you don't have a boss telling you what to do, you have to tell yourself to do it.
Yeah. I would think that would be one of the hardest things about being an artist or a writer for that matter, is to go, got to go in. Even when you don't feel like painting or I hear these people, oh, you go in, you have this creative, immediate lightning bolt hits you and you're ready to create. No, that's not true at all, right? It's like, okay, I got to paint this. I have to get it done, right? I mean, that's right, isn't it? Yep.
Show up and do the job. Yeah. At least try it, put in a little bit of effort, and usually something happens.
And it's gratifying, I'm sure, when you get something that's very successful, that you've got, I got that one right.
Yeah, and I have a whole, folder of things that I want to do, so I've got a lot of stuff lined up that future.
Subject matter?
Yeah.
Can you share any of that or want to? Or maybe not.
Well, it's just all over, I've been collecting pictures and everything from all my trips and stuff like that, so we're always studying, even when you drive to the supermarket,
it's true, right?
You're observing.
Yeah, if you're smart, you're looking for shadow and lines and something that is out of the ordinary, I think. Sometimes those banal, out of the ordinary kind of everyday things can be the most interesting.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, you're not banal but you are out of the ordinary. I'll give you that for sure. Any parting words you want to say, or should I just let you get back to Phoenix?
Well, I just I appreciate what you do for the artists here.
Yeah, we enjoy it.
It's really unique, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, well, we're grateful for you, because without the artists, we don't have what we have, and we don't have those relationships. And when you think about a 20-year relationship, that's a long time.
I know, and so many dealers don't do their work.
Yeah, no, it's not just the artist bring it in, put it on the wall. There's a whole different, for any of those people out there thinking you want to open an art gallery, there's more to it than that.
You can't just open the door and wait for everybody to come in.
Not all.
And I think that's what's happening with a lot of galleries. They're closing, or people want to see it on a different format or something, the internet. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you have to embrace that, I think, as a dealer, all the different aspects that people may want to see it or get their content. The key is finding the exposure, whatever it is. You need to be multifaceted, multi-platform to really.
And you guys have been adaptable.
Thus this podcast. I mean, people can get to hear your story of how you, almost died in a train wreck, work for a train thing, but yet don't paint trains. So, it's, I think it gives the people who listen and watch this the opportunity to see who's behind that wonderful painting that they have or might be considering. So it's important to do those things, and we'll continue to do it as long as we can, and we're having fun doing it. And Gregory, I just I thank you for being, supporting our gallery and being a great artist. Everybody go check out his work. It's really amazing. He's one of the premier painters, and his plein air work especially is great. And we may see some abstract stuff coming out of Gregory in the future. And artists that do that, like yourself, who can do that, it's a different skill set, but it still requires an immense amount of discipline and abilities to do that. I don't think people realize. They think, oh, anybody can do that. No, abstract art can be very difficult to be harmonious with the colors and structure and paint and all that. You kind of know it when you see it. So I've looked at your abstracts, and you definitely have that ability if you want to take it to that next level. We'll see. Hope you do.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take that as encouragement.
Yep. All right, Gregory Hull, thank you. Our dealer diary.
Thank you.
Nice having you on today.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
That was good.
Lord of mercy.
Yeah, easy, right? We need your support for the Medicine Man Gallery channel, so make sure to click the subscribe button and tap the little bell icon to be notified when we upload a new video, which we do every morning on Wednesday and Friday. See you soon.